Here we go. I am Hungarian. That's the accent you hear, and I love food. I love filming, cooking, and so when recently my parents had a relative and friend stay with them, Marika, who's a trained Hungarian professional chef, agreed to prepare Hungarian goulash and some other meals that I could video so people can see how it is that Hungarians prepare food because it is absolutely stunningly delicious. Okay, she's got the carrots and parsnip, tomatoes, everything all ready there. She says everyone knows how to get them all ready. She doesn't cut as fast as you see other chefs do, but she cuts it into half, and then you cut into it like this. You want small squares. Now you start slicing down like that, and you end up with these little squares. I guess you're going to be translating that into Hungarian, she says, and I am, doing the best that I can. And the first half of the onion is done. Here comes the second one. She used 2 onions. These are nice big onions. If they're smaller, you don't have to cut them in so many pieces, obviously. These are fresh. They cut up really nice, and they don't have that skin on them that makes them want to jump out of your hand when you're slicing. These ingredients are from the farm, or more precisely, my dad's backyard, because he has a garden. Now that goes into the pot where the lard is melting. Lard is used exclusively in Hungary because most houses used to have pigs, and that people that lived out in the smaller cities and that, they would have a pigsty in the back, they would have a hog, they'd get a little piglet in the springtime, they'd get it grown big on the greens from the garden and leftovers and stuff like that. No antibiotics, no growth hormones, and in the fall they would slaughter the hog. Now she's saying that you put your thumb beside your finger, so you never have your thumb exposed, and that way you can slice faster without ever having to worry that you're going to cut off your finger. And she cuts the garlic the same way as she did the onion, which is interesting because here I've seen chefs, what they do is just put the garlic head down and take a big knife and give it a smash, and it squashes it all out, and then just do a quick little chop on it. And the garlic is ready. Now you put the garlic in with the onions and you start cooking it on medium heat. Already the smells, the aroma is wow.
Paradicsomot teszünk bele, mivel nagy a fazék, ezért 2 jó nagy paradicsomot kinéztem. Semmi más, csak meg van mosva, ki van véve ez a zöld cipkája.
Because the pot is large, she's picked out 2 tomatoes. Now a lot of people don't put tomatoes into goulash. She didn't take the skin off it by purpose, because she cuts it in the same way as she did the onion. You just got to be slower and more careful because it is dancing around. If you cut them into little squares like this, the skin disappears in the soup. The skin has vitamins and stuff, so you need to get all the vitamins and flavors and taste into your food. A little bit bigger squares than the onions, but it doesn't matter because it's got a lot of liquid in it. So you just keep cutting on them. Cut them all into little squares. There are two tomatoes, 2 onions, a bunch of garlic, and just getting it all ready. I focused back on it because I could hear it, I could smell it. It's driving me nuts. I love food. Give it a little stir, make sure it's not burning. Caramelizing the onions and the garlic together. and you continue getting your ingredients ready. Cooking is not rocket science. Like I used to watch my mom cook when I was young because I love food, and I learned how to cook just from that. And for that matter, even my father, 82 years old, is a fantastic cook. And I got to tell you, like Cindy and I travel a lot. We've eaten in a lot of restaurants, fine dining, all the different things. But the best food we have is home-cooked meals. It doesn't matter if you're in Mahawal and you have a bunch of older ladies preparing fish and all the dishes, or wherever. It's absolutely stunning. Now she's pitting the peppers out, and she was showing that if the stem is short, what you do is just shove your thumb into it and get it out. Hungarian goulash is opportunistic cooking. You use whatever you have in the summertime. It's a summer dish predominantly. So now we have 2 onions, garlic, 2 tomatoes, 2 peppers, all diced up. There's no seeds or anything in it now. It's not a hot pepper, it's a sweet pepper. But again, peppers are full of vitamin D and all the minerals and vitamins and stuff like that. So it's all part of the cooking process. Hungarian goulash soup. Keep stirring it so it doesn't burn. And now you can put in the tomato and the pepper into it. Keep cooking it with very little heat. It's good to put all these ingredients into it because it'll thicken the soup, because this is not a thick soup. There's no roux made for it. It's just the broth. That's pork taken out of the freezer, she's saying. It's just like chops with bones, and even the bones give that aroma, the flavor, the taste to the soup. And in Hungary, they don't buy the meat like this. They go to the butcher and they say, like, I want a piece from here and I want a piece from there, and they take the bones out of it themselves and they put this bone into the soup in whole. But she's taking the bones out of it now and cutting it up, and you cut it into small cubes. It doesn't have to be, exactly the same size. Just keep cutting into little cubes. If you're cooking outdoors in a pot over a fire, then you put bigger chunks into it, because it somehow gives it a better flavor. It's still a little bit frozen, but you can work with it. It's just cold on the hand. Take out the meat, the bone. Now you can see that this meat is a little bit fatty, and again, Hungarians use all that sort of stuff because it gives it flavor. For goulash, it's better if it's got a little bit of fat in it. Hungarian food is not a dietary food. It's not for diets. The true Hungarian foods, they're not for dieters. They'll put some weight on you. But the thing is, you don't have to eat a lot of it. But the flavor's in it. And I think this, by the way, applies to a lot of food from all over the world. The bones are very good for the soup. Now some fat you do throw away, like those pieces. Who cares? But keep slicing it into little cubes. It doesn't matter if there's a little meat left on the bone, because you can take it out and eat it off afterwards. She's taken the heat off the pot quite low, so you don't have to be watching it steady, because there's a lot of meat to be cut up. But you can prepare all the ingredients ahead of time, and then you don't have to do it while you're cooking. She wanted to prepare everything so that you can see and it can be videoed, and that's a bit thinner, so she cut it a larger piece. She cuts them all into different pieces. You don't have to be strict about it. Now you got to remember that this kind of cooking, what you're seeing, is Hungarian home cooking. This isn't a restaurant where everything is all prepared and there's 2-3 people helping along the way and stuff like that. These are home ingredients that you can make anywhere at home. So some of these bones are bigger, so she's got this big slicer thing that she smashes it with and cuts the bones into half, or even three pieces. With that, you got to be more careful, because you can cut your hand with it. Once it's broken through, then you can take a smaller knife and cut through it. She didn't want that piece. It's too fatty. That too. You're the cook. You're the person in charge. You make the decision. You know, it's up to you. In Hungary, this is the national food. A long time ago, it was the shepherds that would be preparing this. They'd be out with their flocks all summer long, and kind of like you think of cowboys here going out with the cattle. Well, in Europe, it was the shepherds out with the sheep.
És a juhászoktól ez átvéve, akkor ők bárányból vagy kecskéből csinálták volna?
The shepherds would be making this out of lamb instead of pork. It would be made out of lambs, because there was a lot of lambs in that time in Hungary, and you'd be using the lamb for making the goulash, which I bet you is also very good. I don't remember having it, but I think we're going to try that maybe this winter. Bones. It gives it a good flavor. Jó íz means good flavor. One more piece left. That's already now the meat. The smaller, bigger bones, everything all together. In the meantime, the ingredients already are cooking, and that is kind of like a soup bouillon base. It's put in there. In Hungarian, it's called vegeta, and you can buy it in many stores around everywhere. Vegeta. Now comes black pepper. She found the black pepper that they sell in the stores here quite a bit stronger, hotter than the black pepper that they have in Hungary. So you got to be, again, judgmental. Do you like spicy or not? Another spice. It's spiced up. Hungarians put a lot of spices for flavor and taste into it. A little bit of caraway seed, just a very little for flavor, very little for flavor. That's what makes it into a true goulash. And the most important is paprika, red paprika. That's a Hungarian staple in cooking. Just like lard, so is paprika. Everything is with paprika. It's grown in 2 specific areas in Hungary. They're both great areas.
színében erősebb, intenzívebb, mint a szegedi.
The Kalocsa area paprika has a stronger color and flavor. That's the foundation of the soup. The foundation of the soup, now you put a little bit of water into it. Just not too much, just a little water. Just enough to thin it out because now the meat goes into it. The purpose is not to burn it. And turn the temperature up a little bit. You can see it's a little bit, not quite 3/4 up, between half and 3/4. And now you put the meat in there. It's cooked into, you start cooking the meat so the meat cooks by itself.
Mert hogyha a húst egy kicsit így ebbe a rövidlébe lepirik, picit érezzük, hogy már pirul, akkor ez egy olyan ízt ad a levesnek.
It gives the soup a better flavor if you cook it into it like this, rather than just cover the whole thing up with water and thin it down. But while that's happening, she's getting other ingredients ready. Parsnips, again, from my dad's garden. Fresh parsnips. If you're a cook or if you've used them or if you know their taste, fantastic. And again, this is used a lot in all kinds of Hungarian cooking, even in chicken soup and things like that. Parsnip is a key vegetable. It's called many different things in Hungary, including white carrot. But it gives the soup a really good flavor. The meat is cooking away, and again, I can smell it, I can hear it. It's just wow. This is kind of cooking I can really say I love because it's hearty, it's delicious. You can tell the flavors. You know, I'm not going to say things like, oh, it's earthy. It's earthy. You know what it is? It's damn good. This is not a thickened down soup. There's no flour into it, no roux. But it's a thick, hearty soup. Now she's getting the carrots ready. Again from my dad's garden, fresh carrots, easily sliced. You try and make the slices about even so they cook at the same time. I mean, if you put in a big piece and small pieces, some might be cooked too quickly while other ones are not cooked enough. This goes into the soup when the meat is halfway cooked because they take less time to cook than the meat does. The soup takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to finish. Things that can affect how long it takes to cook is, like in Hungary in the fall when they would slaughter a pig, it would be huge. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of kilos because you wanted everything out of it. You wanted the fat and you wanted the meat and all that stuff. So if it's an older pig, it would take longer to cook because you got to cook the meat thoroughly through. That's the most important, and you want the flavors out. This is, she says it's really good carrots because it's not like the store-bought stuff. The store-bought, you know, you don't get the flavor, you don't get the taste. I mean, if you've ever taken a carrot out of a garden and tasted it, wow. Now we put a little bit more water into the soup and bring it up to a higher level in the pot. She's pouring warm water onto it because the meat has already cooked, so it doesn't really matter. But meat you start cooking in cold water or in water that you bring up to temperature normally. But now that the meat is cooked, you can add hot water onto it.
Hogy abba tesszük oda és fokozatosan melegszik, jobban kioldódnak belőle az aromák. Ha forró vízbe tesszük oda, akkor is
You gotta start the meat cold water because you get the flavors, the aromas out of it a lot better from cold water. It'll happen in warm, but it doesn't get into the soup as much as by starting it in cold. Words from a chef. Trust her. Now what we have here is celery greens and parsley. And she's got them mixed together there because she's going to be cutting them up. But basically the celery greens are the bigger ones and the parsley is the smaller ones. Zeller is celery in Hungary. And the parsnip greens. It's got a very intense aroma and flavor. It just lifts the taste out from the soup and brings harmony to it with all the other ingredients. It's used in a lot of cooking in Hungary. Parsnip and celery greens. She's cutting them first into just bigger pieces. It's easier. And then now she's going to just cut it into small pieces. Just get it all together and then the fast knife action on it. And by cutting it small, it's not going to be hanging off your spoon and stuff like that when you're eating it. Very easy and quick to cut it up like that, she's saying. Now there's a thing that is put into a lot of Hungarian soups, from bean soup to goulash to all the different pea soup, whatever. It's called csipetke. And basically that is a dough. It's your own pasta. The Hungarians love to use it, and it's easy and quick. Bean soup, pea soup, goulash, whatever it's used in. 1 egg, salt, and she just uses a pinch of salt. Pretty big pinch too, but it becomes a dough. Now she's using her fingers, and she says she washed her hands. It's about getting in touch with your food, knowing what you're doing. 1 egg, and you put so much flour to it that you end up with a thick, hard dough. There's no water, let me repeat, no water and no oil put into it. Egg and flour makes the dough. It's got to be a hard dough. So you keep working it around till the egg absorbs, or the flour is absorbed by the egg. The two come together. And if you need to, you can add more flour to it. It has to be a thick, firm, hard dough. Here comes a little bit more flour because she could see that it needs it. Marika is saying you gotta keep working it until you can make a ball out of it. The whole dough becomes a ball. And you keep putting the flour into it, and it's just working it. When you see that there's still some flour left in the bowl and it's starting to get firmer and harder, then you start working it hard. It takes a good grab, press it down. Good grab, press it down. Once it's made into a really thick, hard dough, then you'll see what happens. You got to do it
Most már 2
until the
kilóra
flour
dolgozom,
is gone.
mert
Now she's
érzem,
using
hogy
2
ez
hands
elég
on
a
it.
tészta, és ez már erő kell.
És vizet nem tették bele, vagy
Nem,
olajt.
vizet, olajat
No
nem
water,
teszünk bele.
no oil.
Ennek az igazi házi csipetke
This is the
tésztának
real,
az a lényege, és
authentic
nem csak a
Hungarian
csipetke
chipetke.
tésztának, hanem nálunk az
In
igazi
Hungary,
tésztát,
all
azt mindig úgy kell
pasta is
készíteni,
made this way.
hogy annyi lisztet kell beletenni, amennyit a tojás felvesz, és nyújtható vagy nyújtható, csipegethető legyen.
You only put as much flour as the eggs will absorb.
Be víz van, az már nem olyan állapú.
If you put water into it, it's not as thick and it'll be absorbing more of the soup and stuff like that. So if you make it that way and you put them into the soup broth could disappear as it's absorbed by the pasta.
Majd beletesszük a szaggatás után, hogy akkor a levesünknek a levét magába szívja, mert hiszen nincs már mit magába szívni, hogyha már eleve itt megadtuk neki a kellő alapanyagot, vagyis lisztet. Ha nagyon lágy a tésztánk, akkor bedagad, és akkor eltűnik a levesről a lég. Ez egy jó tészta lett,
That's hard. Work it.
és ezt finom lesz majd.
It's going to be finom. It's going to be delicious. Just a little ball of dough. And all that is a flour and an egg. As basic as you can get.
Egy picit hagyjuk pihentetni majd.
You leave it rest a bit after it's
A
worked,
benne lévő nedvesség, a tojás
so the moisture inside it from the egg,
majd a liszttel.
it just
Ez
gets
olyan,
more
amikor egy
absorbed by the
keldőt
flour.
csinálunk, és hagyni kell pihentetni, mert akkor az alapanyagok úgy tudnak összeérni, összedolgozódni, úgymond.
It just allows the ingredients to come together by leaving it rest.
Ez a pillanat következik.
Meanwhile, the soup is cooking. Now the meat is about half cooked, so now the carrots and the parsnip can go into it.
Sárgarépátnak a fehérjépát is. Lehet,
In Hungarian, it's called yellow carrot and white carrot, the translation.
és akkor ez így.
Now you're starting to see a hearty soup taking place. Now remember, that has in it garlic, onion, pepper, tomato. It's got meat in it, carrots, parsley,
Nem túl
parsnip,
jó,
I should say.
mert ugye kevés zsírt.
Now we start working with the chipetke dough. And what you do is you take little pieces in your hand and you start pinching off pieces, because chipetke is basically pinched dough. And she has a tray that she's putting it on it. There's flour on it so that they don't stick together. And you just keep pinching and getting them ready. You can get quite fast at it and get through it. It's your pasta. It's a Hungarian pasta in lieu of noodles or whatever. It is a lot easier and quicker to make than the whole soup, because she prepared it for me to film, took maybe an hour to get ready and another hour for it to just cook on its own, and it's done. And it like knocks you on your butt. It's so good. So you don't want them to stick together. That's why you have the flour on the trays. Take another piece, get it in your hand, and just keep pinching off. My mom used to make it the same way. She remembered. She only has a small piece left now. That's them. Now she's going to tell a story that was really amazing to me, because like here where we live, we use pasta. You know, I mean, if you're going to make spaghetti or even for soup or whatever, and we go down to the store and we buy the pasta in their 300, 500 gram, 1 kilogram bags or containers, whatever, and we have all the pasta. But that wasn't always the case. And Marika is saying that when she was young, she remembers with her mom making the same dough, and then you get a rolling pin and you roll it out paper thin. And then as you're rolling it, when the dough goes around the rolling pin, you cut it. So you get all these pieces. Each time you roll it onto the rolling pin, you cut it and you stack those on top of each other. When you get a big stack of it, you start slicing it like it's all stacked up, maybe about 2-3 inches wide, and you start slicing it as thin as you can. And you end up with soup pasta, you know, like for chicken soup and stuff like this. And she used to have, like with her mom, a pasta day when they would use 10 kilograms of flour, 100 eggs, make all the pasta, cutting it in all different forms and shapes. So you had thicker ones, you had thin ones, square ones, all these. And outside they would have a large table. This was predominantly done in the summertime, so you had a big table which would have a white tablecloth on it. And then when all the pasta was cut, it would be put out there to dry in the sun. And what I found interesting about this is that I never thought about like what people did before you went to the store and buy it. And now, even learning this, I know that if anything came along, I could make my own pasta. It just doesn't matter. It's easy. It's not rocket science. We don't have to depend on going to the store if you want to put a little bit of elbow grease and work into it. When you had the stacks of them, you could cut them into bigger squares. You can cut them any which way for all different soups. It was a whole day's work, big table, tablecloth. All the pastas would be put out there to dry. Then they would take a paper box and put plastic wrap inside it, and then the pasta would go into the boxes, and it would go into the pantry. And they had it all ready, and they knew what was in it. Imagine a pasta, you know what's in it. It's got flour and eggs and salt, and there's your pasta, and you got it made for the winter. Your whole winter looked after. I mean, I never thought of it, so like I said, I found that really amazing. Now she's going to be testing the soup to see how the meat is, how's it cooking. In the meantime, we did get some potatoes cut up. You can see them beside there, because that's another ingredient that has to go into the soup, potatoes. And the potatoes too are from my dad's garden. No more salt, it's good. We tasted the soup. To her taste, it was a bit salty, just a bit for her taste buds. But she says you put the potato into it, and generally speaking, the potato absorbs the salt. So it's going to be perfect. Put the potatoes in carefully and to the side so it doesn't splash up. When the potato's in it, now will come the csipetka, but first the parsnip greens and the celery greens. And the soup is done, except for the cooking.
Belejön a csipetka is. Azért tesszük el a krumplit a csipetkével egybe, mert ugye a csipetkénk az egy nyers tészta most, az nincs
The chipetke is a dry pasta right now because it's a raw pasta is how I meant to say it. It's raw. It hasn't been outside to dry out. So it'll be done very quickly for cooking. If it was dried out, you'd have to put it in earlier for it to cook through. Now they put the chipetke from the tray that had the flour on into a sieve, and you get all the flour off it because you don't want the flour in the soup because it'll thicken it up. Just get all the flour off it. Get it all off. It's not a thick soup. It's a broth soup with a lot of awesome ingredients. There's no roux in it. One kind of soup that Hungarians make is a thin soup that doesn't have the roux, and the other one is a thick soup that has a roux. Now comes the greens. 10 to 15 minutes depending on the potatoes, and it's done. And that's basically, you're looking at a Hungarian goulash. All the ingredients, and in this case, predominantly from my dad's garden, the potatoes, carrots, parsley, everything except for the meat came from my dad's garden. So you want to talk about a hearty but healthy meal on the table and ready to be served. The only problem I find with this, and I gotta tell you, it's a big problem for me, is that the taste is awesome. And before Marika was saying that if, because Hungarian food is not a diet food, it puts the pounds on you, and she said that, well, don't eat much. I just find that so hard to do because it is absolutely amazing. So, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.